Yes, Jaja Morph here. I got a public announcement. You need to get this book, Modern African Arts. If you want to know the real history about art, it starts here. Make sure you go grab that. I've started reading it. Jeez. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Lloyd Downer. I'm part of the Downer family. There's quite a few of us here in this country now. But back when my dad first came over, and he was one of the first Downers.
Which country?
From Jamaica.
To where?
He came from Jamaica to England. And he went to, by luck, moved to Bristol. And when he first came, couldn't find anywhere to live. Nobody would take black people in. It was a Polish lady who took him in, and others. There were 12 of them in one room, 12 of them to a bed. So they do shifts on the bed.
So your dad would be considered the Windrush Generation?
He was Windrush Generation, yeah, exactly. He was one of the first ones that came over. And he actually came over to find work so that he could do better for his kids and his family. Master stonemason in Jamaica. He had his own business, and why he came over, who knows. But anyway, he decided to come over to Britain, and couldn't find work. They said, "You're not qualified over here. Master stonemason from Jamaica, you're not qualified over here." So he found the only work that he could do, which was, I call him the horse. Basically, he worked on Avonmouth docks, carrying produce on his back, day in, day out. He worked for a year solid and saved £250. He was determined. He saved that money, and he was able to put a deposit on a house. In those days, they had something called redlining. Some people might remember that. So the estate agents would all get together, and they would say, "We want no blacks in that area," and they'd put a red line around a certain area. I mean, I learned more about this years later when I went to university. And no blacks in that area. He went, and they said, "I'm sorry, you can't have that. You can't buy that house." So Dad's quite clever. He got a white friend to go there and buy the house on his behalf, and then transfer the house over to him. That's how he had the first house on Richmond Road. And I found out later on the reason why it's called Richmond Road is because rich people used to live there. And someone told me later on, years before, you wouldn't have been allowed to walk up that street. Anyway.
Is that in Bristol?
That's in Bristol, yeah, exactly. And I remember our neighbours. The neighbours had a young boy, the same age as me. They wouldn't speak to us. And they would tell us about our food, the smell, and all the rest of it. Couldn't believe it. You know, there was lots of nice people though. Not everyone was like that. In those days, back in the 1961, it was different days. It was really different days. Anyway, my dad finally managed to get his house, and slowly he brought his brothers over. They worked. They stayed at his house. They worked, and then they were able to bring their families over, one by one, and their kids later. Basically, we managed to get a community of my family in Bristol, and we all worked and helped each other. Sometimes on a Friday and Saturday, they'd all get together, all the men would get together in one room, fire blazing, coal fire blazing, round the table, playing dominoes, drinking their booze, and Mum would cook, and all the family, all the brothers. By the way, there were 7 brothers and 7 sisters. They weren't all here, but some were, and we'd all have a great time, and later on go out to work. So I was at the junior school. I'm not going to say Anyway, even the teachers would call us monkeys and put all the blacks all the blacks at the back. We were all at the back. At school, in Jamaica, I was doing well, so it was reasonably bright. I know, and my hands were always going up, and they simply ignore you. So eventually, you got to realize that you're going nowhere here. They weren't interested in you. I remember we were kicked outside, and our parents didn't understand. You go to school with long socks and short trousers in the winter. You're freezing, and the teachers would say, "Out you go," at playtime, and you would end up with chilblains and all the rest of it. Parents didn't understand. I mean, anyway, and the teachers. I remember one teacher calling me a monkey. Anyway, so I moved to the bigger school, and it wasn't a lot different really. It was called a failing school, and not because we weren't clever, but because we weren't being taught.
So where was the turning point? When did you guys? How did you? If you wasn't getting the right education, what made you stick at education? Because you went to university.
That was years later.
So what happened?
So when they knocked our school down on our school holiday, and then send a rider around to tell us all that don't go back to school. Me being me, I went back to school, and all I saw was a pile of bricks. There was no school anymore. And I asked the question, how do I take my exams? Find yourself another school. How do you find yourself another school?
So why did they knock it down?
I don't rightly know. Years later on, I met one of the counsellors when I was in my 40s, early 40s, so quite a few years later. And I was at university, and this was a guest lecturer, and he was going to talk about it, but I was so angry. I got up and I said a few words to him, and then he called me in to a side room, and I just couldn't talk to him because I wanted to knock his head off. But I wish I hadn't now, because I wish I'd found out why they did what they did. I mean, I got a general idea why they did it.
What's that?
So that we'd know our place. If you leave school and with no qualifications, what jobs are you going to get?
None.
My cousin was a year older than me, and she went to the same school. And she won all the prizes in the school. She was the cleverest person in the school, even the headmaster said so. And the best job that she could be offered was as a nurse. Eventually she buggered off to Canada and did well for herself as a nurse.
Wow. So what contributions do you think that generation did then in the UK or Bristol?
The ones who survived that period, and let's be honest about it, survived that period, because I saw many of my friends who were cleverer than me, went to school so much cleverer than me. I saw them on the street corner selling drugs. So you can see the impact of leaving school without any qualifications and what it did to you. What job could you get? And you got to understand, in those days it was a difficult situation anyway. Without qualification, and especially if you're black, you stood no chance. So in 1965 was the first Race Relations Act in this country, and that's after there was a riot, and this was Harold Wilson brought that in. But there was other reasons as well. It all tied in with the bus strike in Bristol, which changed this country. Yeah, that's why, and that's why that first Race Relations Act was brought in. I was one of the recipients of that first act. In fact, I didn't know it at the time. It was later on I found out. They'd started a program. The government started a program of helping black kids up, and I was one of the first on that program.
That's brilliant.
I ended up getting an apprenticeship to be an engineer. Even without qualifications. I mean, I had some skills. And I got 5 years later on, when I was 21, I was a qualified engineer. So I was very fortunate. I mean, I knew the person who you know, who would help to formulate put together, not the riots, but you know, looking after the blacks in Bristol. You know, and helped to start the bus strike. He was my maths teacher. He was a brilliant man. He's now been rewarded. He's died now, actually. But anyway, it was a difficult period in those days. It really was, you know. So many of my friends never made it. Never got anywhere, you know. So you can see the impact of racism on black people in this country. One or two of them did all right, like myself, and I always wanted to go to university, but it was several years, decades later on. In fact, I was 45 before I went to university. You know, I was an engineer back in the 92.
So what did you study at university?
I studied housing management, became a housing manager, and I managed 1,000 properties.
Wow.
After that, I worked for Bristol City Council, and then I moved over the Forest of Dean, managed 1,000 properties there, over 70 square miles, you know. And then I came back to Bristol as what they call an enabler. So basically what that is, that's negotiated with the private sector to get affordable, some of their properties are affordable housing. And from that, I then decided to move, and I moved up north to Yorkshire, and I was the enabler for local authority. You know, I was really proud of that. I'm proud of what I did, and I made the council a lot of money and a lot of houses.
Well done.
Bought a lot of houses. And then I decided to take early retirement because basically it was time. You know when it's time, don't you?
That's right. Well done.
And just a footnote. Many times I've spoken to my dad. He's 99 now. And he tells me, he said, you know, our family don't realize it. But if it wasn't for me, we wouldn't exist over here. I was the first one that came over. I worked, and I brought all my brothers over, brought my sister over, and there's so many of us now. I can't say, I think there might be about 500 of us.
Wow.
So we're a big family, all from what my dad did. And it's just a shame, really, I can't honour him, you know.
You can honour him in this.
Yeah, you know, all that he's done for us, you know. He started the family, you know, in this country.